All right, I'm going to call this august conference together. And we'll begin with a prayer, and then Beatrice is going to show us a videotape about the business school here at Catholic University. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for your blessings, the blessings of this country, the blessings of this culture and our faith and our church. We ask you to guide us now as we try to put all of these pieces together in a dynamic force that will really help us in our leadership and help our world and our culture. Send your Holy Spirit down upon all the speakers who will be here today. Send your Spirit down upon all the participants too, so that in our mutual collaboration, our deliberations, with all the information that we're given, we can truly charge our leadership with the teachings of your church and help to build a culture worthy of your name. We ask you to bring all of our efforts to fruition in your will, and ask them all through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Mother Mary of wisdom, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And we'll go ahead and proceed right to the video.
In the heart of the nation's capital, next to the National Shrine, stands the Catholic University of America. Founded in 1887, it is the only Vatican-chartered university in the United States. It is here that something new and exciting is happening in Catholic business education.
The vision for the school, our dream over the next years and decades, is that we will change fundamentally the way business education is done. The notion of business as a vocation. This is not something you're doing just as a career, this is a calling. This is the way you serve God and you serve your neighbor through business.
I think really where our uniqueness lies in an ethical approach to business. Business being more than just a job, business being a vocation.
The School of Business and Economics at Catholic University is unique in that it brings a practical approach to the classroom and also brings a very holistic Christian approach. Students that graduate at the Catholic School of Business and Economics learn how to lead their business vocations without leaving their Christian vocation. One can do both.
You can really change the world through business. If you're doing it the right way, you can be a force for good change, positive change.
In 2013, the 100-year-old Department of Business and Economics at the Catholic University of America was elevated by the Board of Trustees to be the School of Business and Economics. In a short period of time, there has been a tremendous growth in student enrollment, faculty, and impact.
The Catholic Church has this tremendous treasure of insights about the human person. It is our mission to bring those insights to bear into the business world, into business and into economics, through our teaching and through our research. So all of our scholarship is founded on the natural law and the social doctrine of the Church.
Pope Francis, since his election in March of 2013, just a couple of months after our new business school was begun, has been emphasizing the importance of serving the poor. One of the things that I find inspiring about the way our business school is conducting itself in the first couple of years of its existence is that it has been thoughtfully and almost inspirationally going about this effort of integrating the social teaching of the Catholic Church with a real and sensible appreciation for business.
Is ethics and morality defined by the law?
We call this the vocation of business because we don't just want to teach you how to get a good job. Our aim is for you to find your vocation, to be the best version of yourself. When you come to CUA as a business freshman, the first thing I do with you on the first lecture, the first day you show up into our classroom, we start a business together. You can be yourself and nothing is going to happen. I challenge you to find what you have to offer to the world. Every one of these students has something that nobody else has.
As you go along.
Professor Wimmer helps a lot. Even now, after the semester, he's still keeping track on my projects and still giving me valuable advice on how to advance my business model.
Besides the faculty, students themselves are forging new frontiers.
The school itself is emphasizing not only having an ethics class, but also emphasizing ethics in all of the different business classes. Not only how to act ethically, but also how that can actually positively impact the company.
I'm a junior accounting major here at Catholic University. I founded the Business Professional Society, which is made up of business majors that are interested in connecting with upperclassmen and business industry professionals around the district area. It's a great opportunity to network and to get job opportunities and internships that we all need after graduation.
We're trying to take an integral view of you as a human being and help you be enterprising, entrepreneurial, innovative, and creative for the entirety of your life.
I think following a vocation is still a heroic adventure. It involves sacrifice, it involves difficulty, but it can involve love and courage and fortitude. And I hope what our business school at Catholic University will do will appeal to the kind of student who still wants a sense of adventure.
Good afternoon. As interim dean of the School of Business and Economics here at Catholic University of America, it's my happy pleasure to welcome you to the Human Ecology, integrating 125 years of Catholic social doctrine. We're gathered here today in the Edward J. Prisbilla University Center, a facility that was completed about 15 years ago. And it's a result of a substantial gift on the part of Ed Prisbilla. I think it's important today because Ed was a successful businessman who believed very strongly in the importance of faith and the need to integrate faith with reason when solving any kind of problem or concern. And I suspect if he were with us today, that he would express great pleasure that we are in the building that he provided to explore answers to the critical questions of our time and do it in a way where we are building upon the great encyclicals of the Church. Because, as you know, there are many buildings in Washington, D.C. where the integration of faith and reason is not particularly appreciated. Some in America today suggest that we should constrain all of our inquiry so that we only look at what is material. But here at the Catholic University of America, in this building that Ed Prisbilla provided, we are able to take discussions in a much freer and more productive fashion. You see, by integrating faith with reason, by allowing the light of faith to illumine all of our undertakings, we can free our inquiry and open up opportunities for innovative action. When we look to heaven for inspiration, there are no earthly limits. So I want to thank all of you for coming and helping us out in this important endeavor. This conference would not be possible without the great support and assistance of the Napa Institute. Tim Bush is the founder of the Napa Institute, and he also serves as chairman of the Board of Visitors for our business school. He's a great friend for the university and a great supporter. And I'd like to call on him to introduce our MC for the conference. Tim.
Thank you, Brian. Brian has given great service to the business school, 3 years old, and he is currently our interim dean while we search for our new dean. Since our founding dean, Dr. Abela, is now the provost of Catholic University of America. So we'll be hearing from him in just a few minutes. Before I do my duty of introducing who needs no introduction, Father Spitzer, I want to welcome all of you the Napa Institute has been one of the greatest things I've ever been involved with, and it's because I've gotten to know the great Catholic leaders of our nation and really of our world. And all of you are in that group. I got on the bus this morning to come over here, and I couldn't believe how many of you that I do know and I have met. And if I haven't met you yet, we will meet before the week is out. So I want to pay everybody's attention to the summer conference, which is July 6th through the 10th at it's called Napa Institute because our summer conference, which is our core program, is always held at the Meritage Resort and Spa. And this year it's a little earlier in July because of World Youth Day being the last week of July in Poland. And there are materials in your packets about the dates and the speakers. And then as you enter the bus tonight, you will get a schedule and a registration so that you can consider that. It's amazing. I think you'll enjoy this program, and that one is our flagship. So I hope you'll enjoy and consider attending it and spreading the word to your friends. A little bit of logistics. Don't miss the evening social after the dinner on the 11th floor. It's on the terrace of the Hotel Renaissance. And ladies, I know you don't smoke cigars, or most of you probably don't, but it's cigars, wine, anything you want is up there, but it's where everything gets done on these conferences. So it'll probably go till midnight. I would not recommend you stay out there every night till midnight, but you might get caught out there till midnight. It's the most amazing view of Washington, D.C., so at a minimum, please go up there and attend that part of the function. We were there last night, and hardly any of you had arrived yet, and there was over 100 people at that event. After the event, we have Mass at 5 p.m. So everything that we do at Napa incorporates all of the faith traditions which we so much enjoy. And the Mass today will be at the Blessed Sacrament Chapel off of the main church, but remember that the Holy Door is located in the Basilica across the way. So you can go through the Basilica, Holy Door, and you are entitled to plenary indulgence, which you can Google if you don't know what that means, but you can use that for yourself, or you can apply it to a deceased friend or relative. And you must go to confession within 20 days. We have priests all over here, so there's no excuse about going to confession. And pray for the Holy Father and recite the Creed, as well as attend Mass, which you can do today if you did not attend Father Spitzer's Mass this morning. So I think plenary indulgence is one of the greatest things. This is the year of mercy, and so I think you will enjoy that. You also watch for some of our other programs. Unfortunately, the next two programs in April inside the Vatican, which will be a tour, a conference on issues that will be outlined there. April 3rd to the 8th is sold out. And then we're going to Israel with Tim Gray of Augustine Institute. That also is sold out. But we'll have other programs like it in years to come. So just watch get on our mailing list, and every month we won't bother you with a lot of emails, but every month we'll try to update you on what we've got going on. With that, Father Spitzer is actually the co-founder of the Napa Institute, and we've been great friends for over 10 years. He used to be, he was the greatest president of Gonzaga University for 11 years. And while he was there, he built that great basketball team. And the guy could never even shoot a free throw, but he knew basketball was important. And he's really brought the university, or brought the university to the forefront of our country. He took a school that might have gone out of business and put it back in business, doubling its enrollment, building 18 buildings, and raising money. And so when he left Gonzaga, he came to Orange County, and we had founded the Magis Institute. And he, along with Joe Miller, who is here today, has worked to build this Reason and Faith Center, running around the world, really, and lecturing priests, bishops, students, and laity about the existence of God and the proof of God through modern astrophysics. And so that's where he's been the last 10 years. He's now officed at Christ Cathedral, the former Crystal Cathedral, and the Tower of Hope. So I welcome him. He is an incredible MC. So his eyesight is compromised, his vision is incredible, and when you hear his introduction to these speakers and summation of their talks and realize that he did it all from memory, you're going to be duly impressed. He's the smartest guy I know on the planet, and I welcome Father Spitzer as our MC.
Thank you, Tim. That was wonderful. Gee, I accept the compliment, Tim, but I know you know a lot of smart guys, so I don't know about the smartest. But Tim is the heart and soul of the Napa Institute and the heart and soul of a lot of great Catholic initiatives, and you ought to Google him too, because truly, no Tim, no Napa. So thank you, Tim, for everything you've done. I want to just formally welcome all of you to this conference today, a conference on human ecology. I really don't have to say that human ecology really does include organizational culture, and of course the organizational ethos that comes from that organizational culture, and all the values, the principles, the ideals that ethos projects not only into the organization but beyond the organization. But it's not just that. Human ecology also includes societal culture, and of course the societal ethos that comes from that culture with its values, its principles, and its ideals. So of course culture matters. It's a source of dynamism. It's a source that either animates us for the good or animates us toward decadence. And we as Catholic leaders have so much to benefit from by studying culture, which some say, right, culture eats strategy for lunch. And of course, if that is true, we can benefit as leaders from what we're going to be hearing throughout these next 3 days. We're going to be hearing about principles and values and ideals within the context of our faith, within the context of our church's teaching on the social encyclicals. And of course, this is going to be, I think, really of great value to all of us who are interested, not just in our own organizational cultures, but in our societal culture. Particularly, I mean, I just look at the upcoming elections, I'm thinking, we need something to be done in the area of culture. And so, of course, we do have challenges, and I think this will help us to face them. We're going to be splitting our conference up into 3 parts, 3 sessions. The first session is really going to concern Rerum Novarum, which, as many of you know, was Leo XIII's great encyclical, which began the tradition of the social teaching of the Catholic Church right at a time when it was most needed. And of course, Leo XIII adroitly avoided the extremes of fascism and, of course, the communist workers' movement and so many other perils by establishing a very wise social encyclical Rerum Novarum on the basis of the intrinsic dignity of every human person, which has always been at the center of Catholic social teaching. And of course, we'll finish that this evening. We'll move on tomorrow to Centesimus Annos, the 100-year anniversary of Rerum Novarum, where St. John Paul II advances so many of the issues raised by Leo XIII for the next century. And then at the break tomorrow in the afternoon, we'll move to Pope Francis's latest encyclical Laudato Si, with the new issues that have been raised by him and raised, of course, in our century. So that's kind of the overview of the conference. You'll see that every one of our speakers is just absolutely remarkably qualified, well qualified, both in terms of scholarship and business experience. More on that later. If any of you want to join in on the social media platform for this conference, just want to share your thoughts with people on Twitter or whatever, you can use the social media platform here for the conference. It's hashtag CUA-BizCon, that's BIZCON 2016. So CUA BizCon 2016, that's hashtag, and that'll get you onto the Twitter platform if you want to share these items. I want to thank in particular all of our sponsors for today's event. In particular, of course, EWTN, who's going to be taping many of these sessions, and so we're going to be able to see some of these on the global Catholic television network in the future, and those schedules will be made available later to you. In addition to that, in alphabetical order, I'd like to thank AVM Biotechnology, Breadbox Media, our good Catholic streaming, their radio streaming from the internet. I want to also thank Catholic Dental Plans, which is a good network for all of us who need that. And similarly, I want to thank Divine Mercy University, was just out there doing the Newman lecture last night. Also want to thank all of our other sponsors. We'll be hearing later on from his way at work later in the conference tomorrow. And also want to thank Sedera Health and also Young Catholic Professionals, which is a group of young professionals Catholic professionals trying to reinforce one another in faith, principles, and values. So thank you very, very much to all of our sponsors for making this conference possible. As Tim just mentioned to you, Father Arnie Panula, who is from the Opus Dei Prelature, I believe he might be here in the room right now, will be available for confessions and spiritual direction throughout all the days of the conference. It'll be in room 331, right here, almost next door to the center, the room in which we are right now. So that's for both confession and spiritual direction. It's now really a true honor to introduce our first speaker for the conference, and of course he needs no introduction to any of us because we know him both through Catholic University and through the Napa Institute. Dr. Andrew Abela has been integral to the CUA Napa Conference from its very origins, from the speakers to the invited participants, and of course he has been very instrumental in building up the business school at Catholic University and was served, of course, as its founding dean and until he was replaced very recently by our Dr. England, who was just speaking with you. Of course, Dr. Abela is now the provost for Catholic University of America. He is exceedingly well qualified to speak about the subject of why human ecology. He has written a well-known book, A Catechism for Business. He has published a wide variety of articles, not only in his specialty area of marketing, but also in the areas of Catholic social teaching, ethics, and the integration of all three. Of course, he worked previously with Procter & Gamble. He's been a consultant for Microsoft, J.P. Morgan Chase. He comes to us as an extraordinarily well-qualified man, a truly Renaissance man who loves business at its heart, to speak to us today on why human ecology. Dr. Abela?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So why do we have a whole conference dedicated to human ecology? Let me see. Can you hear me on this one? This microphone? Yeah, good. Is it working?
I don't think
Not so well. Go back to the other one. All right. Can't move around as much with this one, but that's okay. The reason we have a whole conference dedicated to human ecology is because human ecology addresses a very big problem. It's a problem that was noticed by Pope Leo XIII, whose 1891 encyclical we're celebrating at this conference. It was also, the concern was reiterated by Pope St. John Paul II, by Benedict XVI, by Pope Francis, and continues to be a problem today. And the problem is a disconnection from reality. We're so disconnected that the very word reality poses a problem, a challenge to many academics. So much so that the word is often written in scare quotes, as in reality, as if to say, we cannot really know the way things really are, and that it's somehow unsophisticated and simple-minded to think otherwise. It is interesting to note that the very people who hold this position typically, every morning when they wake up, still make a point of eating breakfast. Or should I say, breakfast. And they're also very keen to get tenure. And so it's fair to ask, if people are so skeptical about the existence of reality, why are they so keen on some parts of it, I don't want to make too light of this. It is a complex issue, philosophically. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, I quote, "It is misleading to think that there is a straightforward and clear-cut choice between being a realist and a non-realist about a particular subject matter. It is rather the case that one can be more or less realist about a particular subject matter." So, I hope you all enjoyed a more or less realistic breakfast this morning. And if it was less realistic, I hope that you had a thoroughly realistic lunch. Otherwise, I suspect you're feeling pretty hungry by now. The thing is, once we lose our grip on reality, bizarre things start to happen. Yeah? So take it as an example, the field of sociobiology. So sociobiologists, for the past 40 years or so, have been trying to explain all of social behavior through evolution. So you might think that you are here today because you made a conscious decision to come. But the sociobiologists will tell you that free will is actually an evolutionary delusion, that we don't really have free will. The sense that we have that we can act freely is just a trick that nature plays on us that somehow has made us more successful in evolutionary terms. This is what they say. But see the problem with this, right? To be consistent, this theory would also have to explain the sociobiologists' activity themselves, right? And as a colleague of mine likes to joke, if that's the case, and if free will is really a delusion that has been necessary for the success of our species, and sociobiologists are trying to puncture this delusion, we probably should get rid of the sociobiologists, because they are dangerous to our evolution, right? I mean, this is how crazy these things become, yeah? Here's another example of disconnection from reality, which is the theory of socialism. As economic theories go, socialism is probably best tested again and again throughout the past century through massive experiments in social engineering, which every single time have failed just as massively, yeah? I'm showing here a picture of a store in the old Soviet Union, lots of people lining up and nothing on the shelves. So it's one of the less dangerous results of the Soviet Union is that there's not enough stuff for people to have. But despite these failures, people continue to keep proposing socialism as a serious solution. Our commendable desire to help other people is disconnected from the reality of what really does or doesn't help other people. The road to serfdom is paved with good intentions, isn't it? So I couldn't resist showing this to you. The handwritten note says, "I took half of your sign because you had one and I didn't. I'm sure you understand." So I couldn't resist that. I'll give you one more example of disconnection from reality. Some years ago, Dr. Alan Sokol, a physics professor at NYU, submitted a paper to the journal Social Text, arguing, among other things, that gravity is a social construction. In other words, it only exists because we say that it does. The editors accepted and published this article. At the point of publication, Professor Sokol revealed that it was a hoax, that it was an impressive and scholarly-sounding paper, but complete and utter nonsense. He designed it that way. And then he said he invited anyone who doubted the reality of gravity to take a step out of his office window, which was on the 23rd story of a building. So we do have this disconnection from reality. So instead of a commitment to understanding the nature of things, and so figuring out the best ways to organize ourselves and live our lives, instead of conforming ourselves to reality, we try to impose our preferences on the world with sometimes near disastrous results. So at this conference, we are commemorating also, as Father Spitzer mentioned, the 25th anniversary of Pope St. John Paul II's encyclical letter Centesimus Annus. Here's a picture of St. John Paul II visiting Catholic University some years ago. In Centesimus Annus, he wrote, "Totalitarianism arises out of a denial of truth in the objective sense. If there is no transcendent truth, then there is no sure principle for guaranteeing just relations between people. If one does not acknowledge transcendent truth, then the force of power takes over." Right? So when we are disconnected from reality, we lose any objective basis for truth, for goodness, even for beauty. We also lose any objective reason for looking for what is true, what is good, or what is beautiful. According to Dana Gioia, who's a Catholic poet, former chairman of the National Endowment of the Arts, and here's a picture of him receiving an honorary degree here at Catholic a couple of years ago, he said, quote, "Thinkers today can't define the perception of the beautiful as an objective experience. For them it is a social construction, an illusion in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is all surface, its deeper meaning created by society as a tool of pleasure or of power. But this cannot explain," he goes on to say, "why we thrill at things that threaten or marginalize us. When we stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, we feel the tremendous power of the beautiful. Yet at the same time, we have a strong sense of our individual insignificance." The point he's trying to make is that there's something very real, very objective about beauty, and it affects us all in similar ways. But you cannot explain why this is so if you maintain that all values are relative. So how do we get out of this problem, this disconnection with reality? Addressing this issue was one of the main points of Pope Benedict's famous address in 2006 at Regensburg. His proposal was to recognize the limitations of what we call science. If only what is mathematical and empirical can be called science, he said that it is man himself who ends up being reduced. Quote, "For the specifically human questions about our origin and destiny have no place within such a science, and they become purely subjective. As a result of this, ethics and religion lose their power to create a community, and become a completely personal matter. This," he said, "is a dangerous state of affairs for humanity." In response, he called for a broadening of our concept of reason, which would leave room for the insights of faith. Quote, "Listening to the great experiences and insights of the religious traditions of humanity, and those of the Christian faith in particular, is a source of knowledge, and to ignore it would be an unacceptable restriction." So this is where human ecology comes in. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis makes a point that Pope Benedict had earlier made. Everyone recognizes, Pope Francis says, that there is such a thing as a natural ecology, that there is an order to nature that we cannot violate with impunity without causing great harm to the planet. He goes on to say, if we recognize this to be so, then why is it so hard for us to recognize that there is also a human ecology, that there is an order to human life as well, and that this order requires solidarity, it requires respect for human dignity, it requires subsidiarity, it requires marriage, it requires private property and the universal destination of goods, and that this order cannot be violated for long without grave harm to humanity. He says, why do we understand the one and have so much difficulty believing the other? So human ecology is the systematic study of human beings in their relationships with one another, with society, with the natural world, in the light of both reason and faith. Not just the physical and social dimension of human life, but the moral and spiritual ones as well. So how do we do human ecology as such? We can take our lead from Pope Francis again. Here's a picture of him on our campus last September. In Laudato Si, he spoke of the dangers of a narrow scientific mindset, and he said that we have to learn to, quote, read reality in a Trinitarian key. We have to see things in the light of the Trinity. The English Catholic writer Frank Sheed described this approach to the reading of reality as having a Catholic mind. What is a Catholic mind? To have a Catholic mind is to see as the Church sees. Most of us Catholics, according to Sheed, when we look at the universe, quote, he says, we see pretty well what other people see, plus certain other features that our Church teaches us, that our religion teaches us. He goes on to say, so we have not so much Catholic minds as worldly minds with Catholic patches. What does the church see when she looks at the world? What is a Catholic mind? First and foremost, the church sees all things as held in existence from moment to moment by nothing but the continuing will of God, says she. If we don't see things this way, then we are not seeing things as they are, and so we ourselves are disconnected from reality. He clarifies this by saying, look, remember that God created us ex nihilo, out of nothing, so that we are made ultimately of nothing. Quote, he uses no material in our making. And then she goes on to give this example. He says, if a carpenter makes a chair, he can leave it, and the chair would not cease to be. It would still be there, which is a good thing, otherwise you'd all be on the floor now, right? So the maker of the chair has left it, but the chair can still rely for continuance in existence upon the material he used, which is, in this case, the wood. But if the maker of the universe leaves it, and here's a picture of the universe, or a very small part of the universe, and here's where Catholic U is, in case you were wondering. Similarly, if the maker of the universe left it, the universe too would have to rely for continuance in existence upon the material he used. Nothing. In short, the truth that God used no material in our making carries with it the not sufficiently realized truth that God continues to hold us in being, and that unless he did so, we should simply cease to be. She then gives a more mundane example. He says, quote, if I saw a coat hanging on a wall and did not realize that it was held there by a hook, we should not be living in the real world at all, but in some fantastic world of our own in which coats defied the laws of gravity and hung on walls by their own power. If God created the world, then to overlook or to ignore the reality of God is not simply to be irreligious, it is a kind of insanity, he says, like overlooking anything else that is actually there. If the world truly exists thanks to God's creative activity, then to see reality clearly is to see it as the church sees it with a Catholic mind. So what are the implications of this? She'd explains, if we see that God holds the world in existence, then we can also see how the universe works. And we can see in particular that the moral laws taught by the church, rather than being arbitrary impositions, are really no less real than the laws of physics. For example, that the church teaches that we should avoid sexual relations outside of marriage is not because she wants to spoil our fun, but because the universe is built in such a way that sex within marriage is a beautiful and powerful thing, while sex outside of marriage is destructive. It is said, by the way, that the single most common sexually transmitted disease among college women is depression. So clinical depression is the most common consequence of casual sex, because this is a violation of human ecology, it's a violation of the natural order, and so people suffer. The obvious response, if you weren't all such faithful people, somebody would be standing up right now and saying, why are you imposing or trying to impose your religion on me? Like by bringing God into this, that this is somehow imposing religion on people. This is the big objection. So how do we handle this objection when a small but growing number of people in the world don't believe in the existence of God? Our friend Frank Sheed has an answer to this one too. He says, imagine you were in a car and you saw the car heading straight for a tree, and you called out to the driver and you said, please swerve or else you're going to hit that tree. And if the driver answered, it's no use talking to me about trees, I'm a motorist, not a botanist. He says, you would feel that this was carrying respect for the rights of a specialist a little too far, right? The existence of God is a fact, just like the existence of that tree. It's not a fact that is easily proven, but, and this is key, you cannot prove God's non-existence, because it is impossible to prove that any particular thing does not exist, right? Because all you can do is keep looking for it until you either find it or you don't, and if you don't find it, all you conclude is it's difficult to find and perhaps highly improbable, but you cannot prove that it doesn't exist. As an example, you've probably heard of black swans from Nassim Taleb, the economist. A great example, right? For the longest time, we thought that black swans didn't exist because we never saw any anywhere, and then we found some, so then we know they do exist. So at the very minimum, science could and should acknowledge that the existence of God is at least possible,
and of very great significance, indeed ultimate significance, if he does exist. The famous scientist Niels Bohr used to have a horseshoe hanging in his house. And one of his friends saw it and said, "Surely you don't believe in this superstition, you're a scientist." And Bohr said, "Oh no, I don't believe in it." He says, "But I'm told that it works even if you don't believe in it." So God's love keeps the universe in being even when we don't believe in him. So human ecology is therefore a scientific study of the human condition where science is no longer deliberately and unscientifically excluding the insights of theology and philosophy. So how do we move forward? I want to propose three things that we are doing to make this study more concrete. The first, of course, is this conference that you are here for the next few days. You'll see presentations on important concepts like virtue, liberty, prosperity, and poverty, justice, inclusion, environment, entrepreneurship, all of them from perspectives that do not shy away from, in fact, heavily focus on using Catholic. The second thing I'd like to announce today at this moment, pleased to make the announcement that we are creating here at the Catholic University of America something we're calling the Human Ecology Institute. The purpose of the Institute is to foster rigorous and multidisciplinary research to explore these many questions about society and culture from a variety of disciplinary perspectives. We are identifying a number of fellows to work with the Institute, and through the generosity of several people, some of whom are in this room, the Institute has already been funded at $1 million, and we are expecting actually quite a bit more over the next few weeks and months. So we're really excited to share this information with you and have a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about what the Institute will be. Thank you. And finally, the Human Ecology Institute is hopefully just one example of the many things we are doing here at the Catholic University of America in order to foster this greater understanding of reality in the light of faith. Some of you know this, some of you don't. If you've watched the video, you should all know it by now, that Catholic U is the only Catholic university in this country that is owned directly by the Church. Every other one is owned by a religious order or by a particular diocese. The only university founded by a pope, so Pope Leo XIII, who we celebrate at this conference. Another thing that you may not know is that Catholic University is not just a liberal arts program and a business school. A very fine liberal arts program and a very fine business school, no question, though I say it myself. We're also a major research university, graduating PhDs in numerous disciplines with many research labs on and off campus, including a very large collaboration with NASA as well. So we're in the ideal position to bring to life this idea of a Catholic mind. So what are the unique insights you uncover when you see the universe as the Church sees the universe? What are the distinctive things we can do when we cultivate a Catholic mind for science, for art, for engineering, for law, or for business? We think we can do very great things, and we are so glad that you are here with us for the next few days. I look forward to sharing this conference with all of you and hopefully meeting everybody in this room. And so welcome and thank you.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Abela. Again, it just fuses together so many different points. That lovely point made by Pope Francis, if we can so easily understand natural ecology, why can't we understand human ecology? And then, of course, the challenge of the great Frank Schlag. If we study human ecology, of course, human beings have spirit, and that spirit points to the origin of spirit, namely spirit itself, namely the perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home that inspires us to desire perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home. And of course, that would be God itself. To deny it is insanity. And of course, if we admit even the possibility of it, then we change our entire outlook on what human beings, cultures, and ecology should aspire to. Thank you again, Dr. Abela. It was tremendous, tremendous talk. It is now a real honor to introduce to you Father Martin Schlag. Father Schlag comes to us from the Opus Dei prelature. He he started his career actually with a Juris Doctor degree from the University of Vienna, but we won't hold that against him. We do need lawyers on occasion. He then moved on to study theology after he was ordained and took a doctorate at the Pontifical University Santa Croce in Rome, and now continues to be the head of the economics department at the Pontifical University of Santa Croce. He has written a number of books, but has 80 publications to his name, articles and books. His important work on humanism and economics is really a classic, and what we are going to hear about today is a topic related to it, the impact of faith on economics. So, Father Martin Schlag, it's an honor to be with you this afternoon.
So good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I have to say I feel at home. Ever since in 2012 we organized a conference here together with Andrew and the Catholic University on freedom and solidarity. So thank you also for this invitation. I feel very honored to speak to people from whose books I have learned such a lot, and I am looking forward to sharing my reflections with you. As an intellectual and academic, I never have the feeling of having arrived at the end. You know, it's always, well, this is as far as I have got so far. You know, so it's work in progress. I would like to begin my reflections by defining the concepts I use in the title, which was given me, the impact of faith on capitalism. So I define faith, or I will use faith, as meaning the individual supernatural virtue by which we accept revelation. It is tying us to God. It is a bondage with God. It has to do with striving for personal holiness through virtues and individual faith and prayer and piety. Whereas religion refers to the institutional form of faith. It has to do with how we humans organize our faith on earth. And so, of course, for a Catholic, these two concepts are inseparably linked. We live our faith in the mystical body of Christ, in the Church, in our religion. But we have to distinguish the two things, I think. Now, capitalism is not a faith, obviously, because it is not revealed. But it is an economic and political system that is based on institutions and virtues. And throughout my talk, I will use the word capitalism in the sense of virtuous entrepreneurship and not as rent-seeking. So in other words, I use the word of John Paul II, good capitalism is an economic system which recognizes the fundamental and positive role of business, the market, private property, and the resulting responsibility for the means of production, as well as free human creativity in the economic sector. End of quotation, Centesimus Annus. Now, I hold, and this is one of my theses, that this form of good capitalism is not fully realized in what we have now, in late or advanced capitalism or financial capitalism, because capitalism, on my view, is about enterprise, entrepreneurship. And of course, financial services are a necessary part of this enterprise culture and this market economy. However, over the last decades, a class of rentiers has re-emerged because asset growth, for whatever reasons, has become bigger than economic growth. Now, also academics who are clearly in favor of capitalism see this and criticize this, and I quote from the Oxford Handbook of Capitalism. The link between the size of the financial sector and economic growth weakens or even reverses once countries become rich and reach the technological frontier. Rent-seeking in financial markets can lead to great private gains but have little impact on economic growth. Growth is actually harmed to the extent that talented risk-takers are drawn into the financial sector to engage in rent transfers rather than starting businesses and engaging in rent creation. End of quotation. Now, all this has led to what I conceive as an enormous financial bubble of the whole Western economic system. And with it, good capitalism and also free markets have entered into a moral crisis of legitimacy. Entrepreneurship and the creation of new businesses has been politically discouraged, or at least not encouraged. And in reality, entrepreneurs need little incentives because they have enough drive on their own. What they need is protection of their time, energy, and capital against undue strain. And free markets are not simply a result of inertia or of not doing anything. You know, Chesterton once said, the result of not doing anything is breeding maggots in the corpse of a dead dog. That was his image which he used. That's the result of not doing anything. Free markets and good capitalism are a cultural achievement. They are the results of a big effort of hard work, of thrift, of diligence, of virtues, of ethical values, of culture. Also of the creation of institutions like joint stock companies or shareholders, of insurance. And so freedom is a precious gift, and it's a fragile gift. Today in the Gospel we read, truth will make you free, the favorite sentence of St. John Paul II. And every time I hear the word freedom, I think of that statue which is standing on the dome of the Capitol, and I guess most of you know its story, because actually it was cast in Italy and designed by an Italian artist who, in the original draft of the model, had put a Jacobin cap on the head of this statue. And the idea was, well, you know, the Jacobin cap was a symbol for freedom, because the Jacobins thought that in ancient Rome the freed slaves had to wear such a cap. In reality, what they were wearing was a solideo, that's the thing that bishops wear, this kind of little skull cap, to be recognized as freed slaves. So but they thought, okay, it was this Phrygian cap, this Jacobin cap, and they had been freed of tyranny, they had been freed also of faith, they had been freed of tradition, they felt that they had been freed. Right? And when the US government saw this model, they said, no, we don't want this Jacobin cap because we never have been slaves. We're not freed. We've always been free. And I was struck by this sentence because it's exactly what the critics of Jesus tell him. We've never been slaves. We've always been free. You know, so the question is, are we really free? Are we still free? Have we become slaves to money? Have we become slaves to unordered passions? Have we become slaves to welfare? I think we need a moral change. We need a moral change towards this good capitalism, to this ethical capitalism of which John Paul II was speaking. And I think it's possible because the majority of business people are righteous and moral, and they have to form a network of virtuosity. The single person oftentimes feels overwhelmed and is in fear of survival. It's a hard life out there. And I once heard a story of a boy who got lost in a cornfield, and the parents were getting very, very nervous, and the boy didn't show up, and so the whole village joined in looking for the boy in the cornfield. And the night passed, and another day passed. They still hadn't found him, and at last a lady had the idea, let's join hands and just comb the whole cornfield. And they found the boy, but he was already dead. They came too late, So we have to soon enough have this idea of joining hands, forming a chain. So I would like to show the impact that Christian faith understood as this individual attitude and virtues, can have on capitalism as a system, and not only on the individual business person's activities and actions. And I want to start with two notes. The first note is that the Catholic religion, that is the Catholic Church, the organized form of our faith, must not be instrumentalized as a steward or servant of capitalism. Faith and capitalism are two realities that belong to different spheres. Faith to the sacred sphere and capitalism to the profane. Although there are important connections between both of them. If we put faith to the service of capitalism, we would be dancing around the golden calf. The paramount aim of life is to give glory to God, and usually we can do so by also doing well. However, there are crises in which we as Christians must be willing to renounce all wealth, even life, rather than renounce God. Christ, and therefore the Church, is not espoused to any single social system. Christ is always more and bigger. We have just recently shaken off the Constantine model of the state-church relationship, also thanks to Cardinal Gibbons, one of the founders of this university, thanks to the American Church and the American system of religious freedom. We have shaken off this lethal embrace in which the temporal power benignly protected the Church, and the Church in her turn was expected to legitimize and support temporal power. And we do not wish to become entangled in a similar embrace by any political or economic system, be it capitalist, socialist, or whatever. Christ is the big disturber of our balances and systems, and Christians are always prophetic shock minorities simply by unapologetically being Christians. We are supposed to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Now, having said that, I'm not falling back into the old doctrine of neutrality towards social systems. Faith and reason are intimately united. The gospel, for which we want to be witnesses, is not an immediately applicable social or economic system. You can't just take the gospel and say, I'll apply this now without any mediation. Religious enthusiasm without knowledge is dangerous. We need philosophy, we need science to render the gospel practicable. And in this sense, faith and virtues protect good capitalism as something which I consider to be a real human and cultural achievement. So, I hope my distinction is clear. I say the Church as such shouldn't espouse one system, but the reason enlightened by faith of us Christians can see that good capitalism, ethical capitalism, virtuous entrepreneurship is what has created the greatest amount of wealth and prosperity for the greatest number of people. Now, the second note I want to make is that I distinguish between social and individual ethics. Individual ethics describes the practices in which an individual person achieves the aim of personal happiness, of flourishing. Social ethics is that branch of ethics in which society is organized in order to achieve the common good understood as the rules of peaceful and just cooperation around a core of shared values. Now, virtues are also important for social ethics. That is, virtues are important also for the organization of an economic or political system, as I shall try to demonstrate. So, is present-day American capitalism a virtuous system? The answer is yes and no. There have been and there are many elements of virtue in American capitalism, but there are also some negative aspects which are actually alien to the original idea of good capitalism. And this is where we need a program of cultural transformation, and this is, I think, the mission of a business school at a Catholic university. Cardinal George Francis explained new evangelization as a program of cultural transformation. And I'm convinced that this cultural transformation is the result of a combination of three factors: of values or truth, of practices or virtues, good virtues, and of institutions that are beautiful, three transcendentals. And here in what I will continue to say, I will concentrate on the virtues. Let me start with courage. I chose courage because I think that we need a lot of courage nowadays. Courage, as you know, is the preformed inclination of our will to suffer when it is necessary to do good, rather than renounce the good deed out of fear of pain. The virtue of courage avoids both recklessness and cowardice. And courage is so important because business has to do with risk. In a free market, the one who bears the risk is the one who makes the deal. If you can't fail, it's not a free market, it's a quasi-market. Now, one of the critics of advanced capitalism, a person I cherish very much, Alistair McIntyre, has written that the inherent short-termism in finance destroys the inner good of courage. And he says, learning to box is just as useless for a violin player as courage for somebody in finance, because he's forced to take unreasonable risk. He's forced to take unreasonable risk. Now, I don't agree with this. I think it is possible to live courage in finance. But I do think his principle on courage is sound. You can't be a short-term thinker, you have to see the whole picture. In order to be courageous, risk must be reasonable and at one's own expense. So courage discovers moral hazard and eliminates it in the system. And courage is also related to hope. In business there are ups and downs, crests and troughs. There's no linear upward growth. And we need hope as a motor to get over the troughs. Human hope keeps business going, and supernatural hope keeps life going. The man who had been entrusted with one talent in the parable did nothing evil. He didn't steal, he didn't embezzle, he did nothing criminal. He was just afraid. He lost hope. He was afraid of losing. So he hid the money and gave it back to the owner. He was paralyzed by his lack of hope. So we need courage and hope to start businesses. And the virtue of courage also avoids foolish debt for non-productive reasons. You will remember that throughout centuries, the church prohibited any form of interest on loans as usury. Even though it was only 1%, 2%, 3%, in reality it was much higher, it was much more. But any form of interest was condemned as usury. Now, this to us nowadays seems strange, but the church in the Middle Ages made an important distinction. She said there's a difference between capital and money in a box. If you have your money at home and you give a loan to a friend, you shouldn't ask interest, you shouldn't charge interest. But if you're a businessman and you give out a loan, then you are entitled to interest. So this distinction was aimed at reducing unproductive and therefore oftentimes foolish debt. And I think that is an important insight which the Bible reflects when it says the borrower is the slave of the lender. And this leads us to the virtue of temperance. Now, temperance moderates the attraction of material goods and is the central for business. Joseph Pieper defined temperance as selfless self-preservation, and it helps us maintain the balance along a middle line, neither greed nor profligacy, neither ostentation nor stinginess. Temperance helps tackle the difficult question of how much is enough, because it nips insatiability in the bud. One of the strong moral messages of Pope Francis is his attack on consumerism. Consumerism, he says, and I quote, brings desolation and anguish, born of a complacent yet covetous heart, the feverish pursuit of frivolous pleasures, and a blunted conscience. End of quotation. Francis defines consumerism as the self-centered culture of instant gratification. It takes the waiting out of wanting, according to the slogan, put it on, not off. Now, the Pope Francis, is not at all opposed to economic growth and consumption as such. Actually, his vision of an ecology of daily life, he calls it that way, ecology of daily life, in Laudato Si, portrays the dreams of so many people of a dignified life in a middle-class society. He describes the material wants and needs of such a life. Consumerism, however, takes consumption beyond its reasonable limits and its moral limits. It's buying things out of pure acquisitiveness, replacing gadgets, machines, or other items that still serve very well, just out of the kick of possessing something new. And as such, consumerism reduces investment, thrift, and savings, and thus undermines the basis of a good capitalist economy. It is an evil that stimulates production in the short run but soaks up resources through waste and weakens moral stamina and resilience in our society. Justice. The virtue of justice gives to the other what is his or her due. Justice is the stable attitude of the powerful and mighty that converts oppressive power into empowering authority. Power is the capacity of constraining someone to do something he or she doesn't want. And authority is the capacity of moving people to do what the common good requires. Power is the force of the robber that steals money from me. Authority is the legal force of the policeman that fines me for having done something wrong. Authority binds consciences, power chains bodies. Justice becomes really relevant in asymmetric relationships of power, which are frequent in politics, in the mass media, in schools, in universities, etc. Power in these asymmetric relationships needs to be curbed. And when authority is just, it is a wonderful gift to any organization. And applied to business, the virtue of justice promotes a system that produces, as the vocation of the business leader says, goods that are really good, services that truly serve, and wealth that really creates value. I once heard a story of a peddler who went from village to village selling razor blades. And what he usually did was he came at noon, he sold the razor blades, and in the afternoon he moved on to the next village where he spent the night, and the next morning he sold his razor blades, and after lunch he moved on to the next village, and so on. And one day, because of bad weather, he had to spend the night in the village where he had sold the razor blades. And the next morning the men tried to shave with the razor blades they had bought, And they all broke. It didn't work. And so they complained. And he said, why are you complaining? Razor blades are good for making money, not for shaving. So he was producing goods that were not according to the virtue of justice. And finally, the practical wisdom. Practical wisdom is an intellectual virtue. It is the trained and permanent openness of our mind to know what is good. It's the trained openness of our mind to know what is good. And it is therefore the basis of all our moral life. Our moral convictions stem from three sources. The first source is our moral experience. We all know situations where we say, no, this is unjust, this mustn't be. No, we all have gone through this. I myself remember when I was working in a boys' club, we wanted to buy a van for the excursions, and we spent a year raising the money. We bought the bus, the priest blessed it, and we went and had our first excursion. And the week afterwards, they stole us the van. You know? And I tell you, I didn't need anyone explaining me the theory of natural law, because I said, this is so unjust. Right? And then we reflect on our moral experience. This is the second source, reflection. And this is very often is in an unsystematic and unscientific way. And many of our moral convictions stem from the third source, and that is culture, education, family, the church. All three sources of morality need to be developed and maintained open in business life. Moral experience requires the connaturality of virtue. Only the virtuous person knows spontaneously what virtues require in a certain situation. We have to reflect on this, and reflection needs time. Thinking means stop. Stop what you're doing. Think every day, every week, every month, every year. Think where you're going. And we also need the lighthouse of the church's teaching. I call it a lighthouse because the church in a painful process had to learn that she cannot impose her teaching, but can only propose it as a free offer in a free society. She's like a lighthouse on the coast that when it's nice, when there's nice weather, we like the building, it's beautiful, spectacular sometimes, but we don't really take much notice. When it's dark and there's a storm and we're out in a boat, then we are so grateful that we have the lighthouse because it shows us where the harbor is, where we get to safety. And only a madman would think, well, this lighthouse is limiting my freedom. No, it's showing me how to use it well. Right? Now, I have left the biggest virtue for the end, which is love. Now, bringing love into business, I think that is the big challenge. And that is the challenge that Benedict XVI formulated in Caritas in Veritate. How do we get love into business? Is that possible? It sounds kind of soppy and corny to formulate it that way. But it is, and I want to formulate a series of academic questions. They sound academic, but they're very practical. Are we aware of the trade-offs implied in modern capitalism? Are we aware that there have been many other forms of economy not based on gain? What does the Enlightenment mean for us? I think that is the real question at the end. Now, modern capitalism in which we live is a fruit of the commercial society of the 18th century. And it's a fruit of the Enlightenment. Both are not essentially the same, but they are historically connected. And as Catholic intellectuals, and we're all intellectuals because we wouldn't be going to a conference if we weren't, we need to continue the serious reflection on the merits and limits of the Enlightenment started by Benedict XVI and many other thinkers. And remember that Vatican II has incorporated some of the elements of the Enlightenment into the Church's teaching. For instance, secularity, good secularity, the emancipation of earthly affairs from ecclesiastical tutelage, the calling of all Christians, also the laity to holiness, etc. But the Enlightenment was a process of cultural transfer and therefore of transformation of Christian values into a non-Christian, because non-Trinitarian, intellectual framework. The Christian values the Enlightenment took was dignity, equality, freedom, among others. But the framework is non-Christian because the framework of the Enlightenment is non-teleological. There's no final cause of creation. And the Enlightenment excluded supernatural intervention of God in history. It is therefore a form of Gnosticism. Now, the liberal social system of the Enlightenment is something I love. It is characterized by harmony, by mutual complementarity and exchange in a commercial society. And it has moral and humanist foundations, at least in the system of Adam Smith. However, two trade-offs pay for this new society. The first trade-off is the replacement of charity through justice. And the second is the loss of heroism. Let me explain this briefly because I know my time is drawing to an end. In the feudal society, the predecessor of the commercial society, charity stood side by side with justice as a structuring social principle. Friendship was exercised as an element of the macro-social structures, not only of the microstructures, that is, of family and the circle of friends. So you did your work not for gain, but because you were born into a role. You were in a family, you were in a relationship of loyalty. That is why you worked. In a commercial society, in contrast, justice is the exclusive social principle for the macrostructures. Charity is banished into the microstructures. And we are a society of strangers that peacefully sell goods and services to each other. In such a society, and David Hume is explicit about this, heroes are a nuisance. We don't want heroes, says Adam Smith, says David Hume. A commercial society basically consists of prudent men and women who take care of their own interests. Now, I personally prefer the commercial society because it is difficult to be free in a static society, as the feudal society was. However, we need to resolve the problem of social cohesion of our liberal societies. And this is not possible without love. Think of the several solutions which have been offered to solve the problem of social cohesion in liberal societies. We have game theory. Game theory is an aspect of mutual utility. We cannot explain social cohesion beyond utility with the game theory. We are all appalled at misery and hunger and exclusion. And social cohesion in beyond utility, beyond the circle of reciprocity, is only possible as a result of heroic charity. That is what I think Christian faith can contribute to a commercial society and can contribute to capitalism, to good capitalism. Heroic charity. The social project of the Enlightenment in which we live needs the leavening of heroic charity in order to survive. The second aspect is we have solved the problem of social cohesion saying, well, we have a liberal system that is based on justice, private property, markets, and exchange, and freedom. And I think we have to become aware that all these values, justice, private property, just exchange, presuppose an answer to the question, why should the powerful and mighty renounce their capacity to dominate the others? You remember the famous passage in Thucydides where the Athenian representatives arrive at the island of Melos and they say, look, natural, and the inhabitants of Melos are pleading for their life and say it's natural law to respect our lives. And the Athenians say, no, Natural right is that the weaker have to obey the stronger. Why is this not true? Because at the origin of justice, at the origin of private property, there is an element of gift. There is a voluntary renunciation to the use of my power to dominate others. Because I have a moral insight that it is the right thing to do. And my third query refers to freedom. Both metaphysics, scholastic and traditional metaphysics, and the Enlightenment have proved incapable of thinking the human person correctly in her relational interiority and in her spiritual freedom. Metaphysics applied physical concepts like substance or causality to the human person. And that doesn't work for freedom. And the Enlightenment simply turned the whole thing on its head. They saw this was incorrect, and they extended interiority to physics. Everything is a projection of my a priori categories. It simply reversed the system. And I think in order to understand human agency as free and imbued with spiritual meaning, not only technical efficiency, we need a hermeneutical approach that understands sense and not only explains facts. Remember the prophet Nathan that goes to David after David has committed adultery and murder. And Nathan has to tell him the story of the rich man and the poor man. The rich man doesn't want to sacrifice a lamb, and he steals the lamb of the poor man that was his only belongings. And David says, this man is going to die. And he says, you're this man. And only when Nathan has done this hermeneutical service does David understand. That is the hermeneutical approach that communicates sense, not only facts. Now, let me return, and with this I conclude, to the mission of a business school at a Catholic university and the impact of faith on capitalism. I think a business school at a Catholic university is involved in the new evangelization of business, which is a program of cultural transformation. Its great challenge is to discover how to insert charity into the economy by offering a hermeneutic that makes us discover my brother and my sister and the people I deal with, be it as clients, as consumers, as producers, or in whatever capacity I might encounter them. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Father Schlag, for that truly important insight into charity or gift as a real protection for our entire capitalistic economic system. The will to dominate and the will to power expressed by Nietzsche and so many other philosophers, Schopenhauer and so forth, is surely the destruction of the capitalistic system. Because, of course, it will create injustice upon injustice because, of course, it uses its power to dominate irrespective of justice. And charity is that protection. Charity is the protection of justice. Justice is the protection of the capitalistic economic system. It is the prevention of injustice from infecting free markets. And faith is the animation of charity. And of course, herein, I think we get the impact of faith on capitalism. And I think it's a tremendous insight. And of course, I won't go into the hermeneutics of freedom right now. But I do think what you're on to is something that could really be a liberating principle for all of us as we take our faith into our workplaces. Thank you again, Father Schlag. We are now at a break time. I think we have 15 minutes for said break, so if you could return promptly in 15 minutes, we'll resume our conference with two additional fine speakers. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a prelature. It's a prelature. That's on their official biography. The Opus Dei Prelature.
Yeah, that's on the biography.
It is. I mean, that's their official biography. Oh, I heard it twice. Which is memorial priest attached to the Father. Okay, well, I just took it right off the. Just forget that sentence. Okay. It's wonderful to see you. Okay, thank you.
All right, got the elbow there?
Yeah, you have.
Yes.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, I'm pulling this one up. I just wanted to load the.
It's the very mic that Donald Trump got upset about. I don't know why. Oh, they're the worst. I don't have an extra.
We don't.
Well, I see I have my own little lava here, so I had to turn yours off and use mine because it was popping so bad. That's the reason I put it there, because I do. Appreciate it, thanks.
How to loop it.
So slideshow, and then
Set up slideshow.
yeah, set up slideshow.
Loop continuously until. Well, do you have the schedule?
Check 1 2. Check check.